On episode 18 of Let's Talk Bitcoin, we talked about the potential for Bitcoin in Kenya and eventually came to the conclusion that the folks with power in the system who could enable Bitcoin because of transaction fees and integrated government taxation are also those with the most to lose from that happening. Pele Braendgaard is a man with a vision, co-founder of the global wallet service Kipochi. He joins the show from Nairobi. Pele, what on earth are you doing in Kenya?
Well, Kenya is one of the most interesting places in the world right now when it comes to electronic money. It's obviously in Africa, and most people think Africa is really primitive. And yes, it has been in the past, but Kenya has a very interesting mobile money service called M-Pesa, and there are several competitors here as well. They're very widely used. People understand it. So that alone makes it very interesting to be here for Bitcoin because people understand Bitcoin fairly instinctively, even if they haven't necessarily heard of it before. But it's not like a great jump as it is in, for example, California or Denmark.
So what is Kipochi? How does that work?
Well, Kipochi is a very simple wallet. We call it a mobile wallet because it's designed to work on a phone. Kipochi is a mobile web wallet. It's designed to make it very easy for regular users to use Bitcoin. We're not designed for hardcore Bitcoin users. We don't store the full blockchain on the phone, and we try and hide some of the more complicated terms within Bitcoin. Like, we don't really mention the blockchain. We prefer using phone numbers instead of addresses. We use millibitcoin and shorter transaction IDs. Some of those things may sound bad for Bitcoin purists, but that's what we need to do to bring it out to a wider audience.
Why is that? What is the advantage of doing those? Why were those decisions that you made?
They fit better into what people are used to. We've tried really hard to make it similar to what people are already used to with mobile money systems down here. Particularly the phone number is key here because people are used to that, to sending money to a phone number. I mean, our system obviously supports sending money to an address. It's just very hard to enter an address on a phone. Yes, you could do QR codes if you have an Android app, but most of our users aren't going to have Android phones. So we need to make it very simple.
If the address is attached to the phone number, are any of your users, do you see a use case with your product that involves privacy or anonymity, or is this all about convenience and all about trying to enable commerce rather than about some of the things we focus on more in the Western world?
It's really about making it convenient for the end users right now. And there are certain privacy issues, obviously, having a phone number mapped to an address. We are looking at various ways of improving that. But for now, we think that's a minor issue. We may be wrong with that, I have to say, but we are looking at ways to improve that.
Well, compared to M-Pesa, which is, again, one of the systems that you're competing with there, is that something like, is there any sort of anonymity or privacy implications there? Because it seems like with that type of system, there wouldn't be. So you're not really competing against anything else. It's just this is a competing service that has less fees. Is that the basic pitch?
We're not really competing with M-Pesa. M-Pesa, it's hard to compete with here. It's not really our target competitor. What M-Pesa doesn't do is that it doesn't do international payments, and it's not all that good for doing commerce transactions, like web commerce transactions. You can use M-Pesa to buy things in a shop. It's a little bit harder to buy things online with it, even though you can do so. So that's really where we're targeting. In Kenya itself, we're mainly looking at our service as being a complement to M-Pesa as opposed to direct competitor.
So what's the response been from new users on the ground who are actually getting this in their hands for the first time?
People are quite excited about it, particularly people who have friends and families abroad. Down here, it's not just the traditional money coming down from the rich countries to here, but Kenya is in the region a fairly rich country, so there are a lot of immigrants as well here. So there's actually a lot of outflow as well. It's still early days, so I can't really see specific numbers and flows and trends yet, but most people that have used it really like it, find it very easy to use, and they like the fact that it looks and feels fairly similar to M-Pesa.
One of the concerns that we had when we were talking about this is the idea that because the Kenyan government is taxing M-Pesa transactions, I know you said that you're not competing with Safaricom, but the reality is that you're providing some kind of similar services. Then there's overlap there. So if people started to switch en masse to your product versus Safaricom, that would be to the detriment of the tax base as far as the government has it set up right now. Have you had any contact with the government? I mean, do you have any sort of read on if this is a concern or if, it's just something that we're blowing out of proportion hypothetically?
I think it will be a concern in the future. We haven't been directly in contact with the government yet on this. We are going to start reaching out to them and explaining to them what Bitcoin is and how it works. We understand, for example, if they feel the need to tax exchange transactions within Kenya, which they're pretty much within their right to do. But Bitcoin transactions themselves are harder and a different beast. So we hope to reach out with them and teach them about how Bitcoin works to avoid those kinds of issues.
If when you talk to the government, they say, we want to be able to tax this, is there any sort of mechanism by which you can enable that? Is that something that you would even consider? Is that just completely off the table and, they can ask, but there's nothing we can do?
We don't think that they can tax the actual Bitcoin transactions themselves. An exchange transaction with an established local exchanger or something that goes through, say, M-Pesa will be taxed somehow, probably in the future, if not already. I mean, if it's done via M-Pesa, the transaction is already taxed. I don't see that happening directly, but we would definitely be open for talks with them and explain what is and is not possible using the technology if it comes to that.
I'd like you to respond to this statement I'm about to make. Bitcoin will see mass adoption last in the Western world. Bitcoin broadly is for the other 6.5 billion.
I agree with that completely. There's a much greater need for Bitcoin outside the West. As such, it's definitely going to grow here. I also personally think that Kenya is not necessarily the place where we're going to see largest growth of Bitcoin because there is already a good viable alternative called M-Pesa. So I don't see Bitcoin as being huge in Kenya itself. Other countries in Africa, oh, absolutely.
This is a new product that you've launched. So did you launch in Kenya with the idea that because there's already this understanding, even though you can't capture all of the market, you'll at least have an easier time integrating and then from there you can grow? Or are you in a bunch of other countries as well as Kenya and that's just the one that I'm choosing to focus on? What's the market rollout plan?
Well, Kipochi is it's on the web. It uses SMS for authenticating phones, etc. So really, we are anywhere in the world with internet and mobile phone service. That's pretty much everywhere. Our main focus is on Africa. There's only one country that we're actively blocking right now, and that's the US for regulatory reasons.
Okay, I was going to ask about that. Yeah. The US is the only country that you're actually not servicing at this point.
Yes.
And so that's because you said regulatory. Is that because you don't know what the regulatory situation is going to be and you're just waiting to find out? Or what's the...
I moderated the regulatory panel at the San Jose conference, and I came away from it being even more worried about doing anything in the US than I was before. Basically, in the US, there is a $1 rule. There's also the rule that if you have any US-based customers, then you're covered by FinCEN rules. That is an issue for a international startup. The regulatory costs in the US were estimated by people who have and are doing it as being roughly $1 million before you can even take the first dollar transaction. So we don't want to affect our core market. And again, we're not that interested in the US market anyway. So it's just safer for us to protect our core markets to just cut the US off. We may do something similar in other markets in the future. And if we can figure out a way of including the US in the future, we'll absolutely do so. But again, it's not priority for us.
So why are you actually in Kenya right now then? If it's not that Kenya is a specific focus, but rather that it's everywhere outside of the US that you view as the opportunity, why is Kenya the place to focus then?
Oh, Africa is my primary focus.
Ah, I see. So are you going around to other countries in Africa?
Yes, but I mean, as it is an internet service, we can actually target other countries using Google Ads and SEO, social media, etc. We will be doing that. I will be traveling around to other countries as well. There's been a lot of interest from South Africa and from Nigeria. Again, South Africa is a fairly developed economy, probably even more so than Kenya. So I'm not 100% sure what that market looks like, but we're letting it out there and people can use it. We're going to look at the usage and find out places that we should target specifically by me doing outreach, like traveling to these countries. I'll most certainly be traveling to Nigeria over the next couple of months because that is a very interesting market for us.
So what's on the horizon? What are the next couple of things that you're working on?
Well, we're making the wallet free for everyone, and person-to-person transactions are going to be free as well, except for the Bitcoin network fee. We just want to have as many users on that as possible. We also, there's a technology called USSD, and it's kind of like a very simple web-like technology, except it uses SMS as the back end, and it works on every feature phone out there. So we have a product in testing. So far, it looks good. But the kicker for that is that we do need an agreement with phone operators to be able to offer that service. But we have that, and we are probably going to be rolling it out in the next week or two here in Kenya on one particular operator. And we hope to do so fairly soon. We believe we could probably roll it out in roughly 20 different countries here and reach a very large amount of users with even the most primitive feature phones. Secondly, well, the way we are going to make money is using a merchant platform that's specifically targeting, again, our target market, the developing world in Africa. That we will be rolling out in the next month or so.
One of the things that's been a little bit of a controversial issue in the Bitcoin community over the last couple of months is this idea of dust transactions, which is to say transactions that are below a couple of cents, where the transaction fee, because the fee is fixed at a minimum level, makes it so that the transactions are very expensive if they're microtransactions. This has been more of a problem in developing countries that have, a different value scale than we do here in the Western world. Is that something that you've run into as a concern? And is it anything to be concerned about?
I am quite concerned about it. I'm looking at different ways that we can batch transactions up somehow. There are different approaches that we could probably take using off-chain transactions, etc. It is a worry because that fee, which seems really small right now, is actually not that low for someone in the developing world. I am worried about it, and we are looking at ways of solving that. But I don't think the blockchain should be scared of these dust type of transactions because these kinds of transactions are really where I think their future growth is going to be.
This show is called Let's Talk Bitcoin. Kind of an interesting thing is, because you have this unevenness in what one culture needs from their money relative to another culture, you're going into areas where there's almost no Bitcoin penetration to start, right? So have you thought about using an altcoin or developing an altcoin that is specifically designed around this idea of microtransactions and then bootstrapping that into these communities that have no Bitcoin exposure already?
Early on, it was something I was considering, but I do think that it's better to use Bitcoin. There is a network effect with Bitcoin compared to other altcoins. And yes, we probably could bootstrap that up here, but we don't necessarily want to be the primary purveyor of transactions on an altcoin.
That makes sense.
That would make me worried about that particular altcoin. I don't want us to be in the situation where we are in charge of 50% of all the transactions.
Right.
That would kind of, defeat the purpose, I think.
It's not so much that Bitcoin already has name recognition in these places, but the fact that it has so many people using it around the world makes it so it's not about your company, it's about Bitcoin, as opposed to if you started your own alt and then it would be about your company.
Exactly.
Pele, if someone would like to use your software, if someone would like to get in touch with you to talk about your project, what are the means to do that?
Well, our service is at kipochi.com. That's KIPOCHI.com. That means wallet in Swahili. So you can find us there. You can also tweet me directly at PeleB. That's PELLEB. Please feel free to contact me.
Pele, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for embarking on this project. This is really exciting. I was not expecting to see Bitcoin in Africa in a meaningful way, and it's really great that you're pushing this forward.
Thanks a lot, Adam.
You are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin, the premier audiocast providing news and insights that cover the rapidly evolving world of digital money. Our twice-weekly shows include analysis of late-breaking news, updates on key technical, business, and regulatory issues, and in-depth interviews with the key people driving the new digital economy. Let's Talk Bitcoin offers sponsors an attractive way to reach a targeted and savvy audience. For more information, email sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.